The Brooklyn Nets fired Steve Nash and they want to hire Ime Udoka. And the Celtics are going to let it happen. I'll try to explain why right now on the Locked On Celtics podcast.
Be ever ready. Recognize the city of champs. Boston, baby, we do what you can't. Locked on number 18, Tatum and Brown, J-team, step back. We gon' wet that and slay teams. Of course, the Celtics, who else could it be? Screaming like KG with the Larry O.B. Karalis above average, assessing the team status. Best daily pod, no cap, salary matching. Clutch like Bird the DJ, keep John on replay. Prime time, dapping up the truth on the sideline. Raining J's, how it started, raising banners, how we finished. Locked on Celtics pod, home of the winners. B.
Hey there, welcome back to the Locked On Celtics podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day, and I'm here for you every day with a free, fresh podcast that drops right to your device when you're subscribed, wherever you get your podcasts. It also includes YouTube. You can watch the show, and I do appreciate you making this show your first listen every day. I'm John Karalis, former professional basketball player. Now I'm covering the Celtics for Boston Sports Journal, and I've written a book called The Boston Celtics All-Time All-Stars. Today's show, big pivot from what I was planning, because it's all about Ime Udoka going to the Brooklyn Nets. Not officially, but all the reporting suggests that's where he's going. Now, there might be some other reporting out there that kind of throws the smoke screen, but it's very clear the Brooklyn Nets want to hire Ime Udoka. The Boston Celtics are not going to pursue compensation, and so pretty soon he's just going to become a member of the Brooklyn Nets. Celtics done. Ime Udoka's done. Time in Boston over. So what does all this mean? And my initial reaction when I first heard it was, hey, Ime is an employee of the Celtics. So you can't just hire an employee of the Celtics. This is an opportunity for the Celtics to get themselves a draft pick. Why not? Go, even if it's a second round pick. I feel like sports is such a cutthroat business that whenever an opportunity presents itself to say, all right, well, I'm going to get this asset, I'm going to get a second round pick for a guy that was on his way out anyway. So, hey, if they want him, they can have him. Second round pick. They're willing to throw a first round pick in there somewhere, somehow, some kind of compensation like that. Take it, because you might need that pick, even if it's a second rounder. If you're attaching, you can attach a second rounder to a traded player exception. You can attach a second rounder to any sort of pick that, or any sort of trade that may just be, if it's just absorbing somebody's contract or anything over the course of the summer where you just need an extra pick. Maybe that one extra pick is the difference between something getting done and not. So I say, hey, if you have the opportunity to use this leverage, take it. Don't be worried about the blowback. Don't be worried about how the perception is going to be, because that all goes away. All you need to do is get your asset and be done with it. So, okay, fine. They didn't want to do that. So why not? Well, there are a few reasons why. After thinking about it, thinking it through, talking to some people, I think the Celtics, first of all, I think they want to just be done with Ime. I think they just, first and foremost, they see this as an opportunity to be done with him and say, Brooklyn, you want him? Brooklyn, you can have them. We're not looking to have any messy entanglements. We're not looking to have any blowback. We just don't want anything. And I get that. Now, me from the outside arguing against that, I can say, okay, like I just said, be cutthroat, be nasty, get your pick, because everybody's going to be nasty towards you. Just get your pick and move on. But the Celtics are in such a precarious position that they might just want to say, we don't want to disturb what Joe Mazzulla is doing. We don't want any sort of questioning about the situation when there's shoot around in Cleveland on Wednesday morning. We don't want anything. We don't want this team to have to answer for anything that the Celtics do. Brooklyn comes in and asks for permission to talk to a guy who's still technically an employee. Boston says, yep, go ahead. You want him? Take him. Now the Celtics, when they're asked about it, can just say, hey, you know what? Good luck. We're talking about this team and who's on this team. And you just move on. So you're first and foremost eliminating a distraction that Joe Mazzulla doesn't have to deal with. And the whole Joe Mazzulla situation is so kind of sensitive. It's difficult. He's in a tough spot. There are questions about whether he is going to have the interim tag removed because Ime is gone. And what does that mean? Does Ime being gone now say, okay, well, you can remove the interim tag, but does that mean that if Brooklyn didn't come around, you wouldn't have removed the interim tag? These are all the little offshoots, all these little questions that the Celtics just want to avoid, right? They don't even want me doing this podcast because it takes away from what the Celtics are doing. But the fact is that they're just, because they were tied to Udoka and because there are so many questions about how does this happen? Why does this happen? Then they just can't help this one day just being this one day. And this is what the podcast and the discussion is going to be around Boston. And one of the questions I got, because I did a couple of radio hits, one of the questions I got was, well, hey, if the Celtics wanted to really punish him, are the Celtics just letting Ime off easy here? If what he did was so egregious that they suspended him, we're going to fire him over this eventually. And my argument is you suspend him for the year because there's real punishment to that. It's going to cost them a lot of money. Then by letting him go to Brooklyn, you're just saying like, oh yeah, go ahead. Well, now that punishment's gone. There's no punishment anymore. And while the joke is, yeah, your punishment is going to Coach Kyrie, which is, I'll get to that in a bit, but they're not in the practice of, like, he didn't do anything illegal. And so the Celtics can't, I don't think, legally get in his way if they don't intend to keep him. And if they get in his way, now it becomes counterintuitive. Now they say, well, the perception can be, we want to stop this because we want to get the pick and we're going to do whatever we can to get the pick. But the reaction can be, well, if you're fighting this, does that mean you want him? Because people don't fight for somebody they don't want. If you don't want him, let him go. And he can turn around and be like, okay, as a member of your organization, I'm suspended. I get that. But now I have this opportunity to go get a job, and I didn't violate that team's rules. And so if they're cool with it, I'm cool with it. I'm moving on. You can't impede my progress for going out and getting another job. If the Celtics really fought hard against this, I think it could have turned into an ugly legal battle. And so that is part of why I think they stepped back. Somebody tweeted at me a gif of somebody washing their hands, and it's the Celtics right now. And I do think the Celtics are very much just washing their hands of this situation. But there's more to it. There's more. And I think that there's more that the Celtics are trying to avoid here by not getting in the way of Ime Udoka. I'll get to that in just a minute. First, let's talk about BetOnline, your number one source for all of your betting needs. You want to bet on football? It's there. You want to bet on basketball? It's there. Whatever sport, baseball, hockey, golf, boxing, MMA, it's all there. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, in-depth analysis on every game you can find. It's also your continued source for sports wagering information, live betting, up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The live betting is such an interesting thing because you can bet in the middle of a game at halftime. You can look at the third quarter over under. You can look at all these other things and bet that. It's an interesting wrinkle. So head on over to the website, betonline.net today. You can use your mobile device if you'd like to. BetOnline is where the game starts. Please gamble responsibly. And make sure you're following the Locked On NBA podcast as well as Locked On Celtics. After you're done with this, go check out Locked On NBA, where I will be hosting on Wednesday, today's show, with Jake Madison of Locked On Pelicans. A lot more stuff on Ime and reaction, his perspective. We dive deeper into that. But so make sure you're subscribed to Locked On NBA wherever you get your podcast, wherever you found this podcast. I think the way the Celtics handle this situation, the Joe Mazzulla element is really, really important. And the Celtics don't want to have the perception of fighting for a guy that they didn't want or they didn't really want, or keeping a guy around that just they could have turned to in a moment of desperation. Because, for example, if the Celtics lose 4 or 5 games in a row, let's say they hit a losing streak, it's possible. And if the perception is that Joe Mazzulla has a hand in this, and people are saying, okay, maybe you have to look in a different direction. How long before the conversation turned to, hey, how bad was that Ime stuff anyway? Can you get him off a suspension? Is it possible to get him off a suspension? I guarantee you there would have been people who would have said, I don't know. And I don't know how many people or how loud it would have been, but as whatever voices there are that are saying it is too many voices. If the Celtics hit a skid and people started calling for Ime, then I feel like it would have been tough for the team. So removing this distraction, I think was a very welcome thing. And I think one other key element to this might be that the Celtics didn't want to be perceived as benefiting from the scandal. As much as I sit here and say the Celtics can deflect whatever blowback there would be, there might be some, no matter what, but getting that asset is so important that it's worth it. Maybe I'm underselling how much that blowback would impact the Celtics. If you draw the straight line, you can say the Celtics saw a violation so egregious that they took the unprecedented step of suspending Ime Udoka for a whole season, and then whatever they decided to do after that, likely fire him, negotiate a buyout of his contract or whatever. If they found that it was so bad, then how do they turn around and say, oh, this is now you have to pay us. We suspended him, but now you have to pay us. So we get our situation where we look like this big kind of, oh, we're such a great organization, but we're still going to get this draft pick because somebody else's, because of this violation, this whatever Ime ultimately, I don't know if he's ever going to talk about it, but whatever happened, the Celtics don't want to sit there and say, yeah, all these bad things happened and we got a draft pick out of it. So I don't think Brad Stevens wants to have that stigma attached to whatever that draft pick is, whoever it turns out to be, or whatever that draft pick brings in. Because let's just say the Celtics use the traded player exception and use the draft pick they get from Ime Udoka, and they go get player X this season at the trade deadline, and he's the guy that wins them a championship. You know that there's going to be somebody that says, oh, Ime Udoka messing around and doing all this stuff won the Celtics a championship because they used that draft pick to get this guy, and he was the missing piece, and that turned it. And that's just not something that the Celtics want at all. That's not something, especially Brad Stevens. He does not want to have this stink attached to him in any way. He doesn't want to be the guy that people say, wow, that dude played such hardball that he turned a scandal into a useful player. And that's, that wasn't something I initially thought about, but in conversations with people, you say, oh, okay, yeah, I can see that. I can see that perception being out there. And so when you stack up all of the things that go against the Celtics that you, and nowadays on social media can be really, really toxic. And those crazy takes end up getting amplified. Sometimes because they're so crazy, people go, can you believe this person is saying this? And then people catch on and say, well, actually, this person has a point. And you just don't want that to happen. Brad doesn't want to go on the radio and have a radio host say, oh, hey, this idea is bouncing around that you guys actually benefited from the scandal. He does not want to have to answer that question. He doesn't want to have any of that stuff. So I think that all plays into this decision. So while people like me can sit there and say, hey, you know what? You can explain away a lot of things. And the Nets came to us and, they were desperate and they wanted to make this decision. And we got an asset for it. That's just how it works. It's not whatever. You can talk your way out of certain things, but sometimes that's actually hard. And there are good points to be made where letting him go, washing your hands of it, it's not taking away a punishment. He's been punished. He had a chance to stick with the Celtics and coach a team that he took to the finals. And instead he's going to coach a team that has been struggling and is in complete disarray. I'll talk about that next. But that could be viewed as like, that's not exactly the easiest thing. So he's got to go try and rebuild his career. The Celtics, there's no legal thing that says because he's been suspended there, if they will have to argue that they intended to keep him in court in order to fight a lot of this stuff that he might turn around. If they held up this job and they turned to Quinn Snyder instead, and Udoka turned around and sued the Celtics and said, you're illegally preventing me from going to get my, to continue my career. You've punished me. You're not bringing me back. So let me go. I'm basically telling you, keep your money. I'm going to go get my money from these guys. So just let me go. If he argued that in court, the Celtics would actually have to turn around and be like, no, we intended to keep you. And that's why. And if they say that in court, then that gets back to Joe Mazzulla and that turns into some big thing. So I can see all of the reasons why the Celtics would not get any compensation. I can see all of the reasons why they say, just go. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to be about it. We don't want to see you anymore. Just go and do your thing. Good luck in Brooklyn. And that's it. I can see all of those reasons. So as much as I will say, I would still like to see the Celtics pick up an asset for letting a guy who was employed by them go to, especially a division rival, especially a potential roadblock to their success. I can see all the very, very valid reasons for them to not interfere and, quite frankly, just stand back, let it happen, goodbye, and move on. Because the Celtics do have to move on. Now, how does this all go down in Brooklyn? How much of a threat can these guys be to the Celtics? Can Ime Udoka actually be the guy that changes their fortunes? Are the Celtics just letting the Nets get good enough to be a problem? Are the Celtics standing by and saying, okay, Brooklyn, now go ahead and become good now, and we're just going to have to suffer those consequences? I'll talk about that next. If you haven't checked out Locked On Sports Today, you are missing out. After you're done with this podcast, make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. It's got all the games that matter across all sports, the biggest stories across all sports, beyond the scoreboard, behind the scenes. It's all the local experts with insights that only they can provide here in the Locked On Podcast Network. It's our signature show. You got to check it out, Locked On Sports Today, available wherever you found this podcast and on YouTube, wherever podcasts exist. The Celtics standing by and saying, okay, Ime, go ahead, go to Brooklyn. I've explained all the reasons why that's That's what they might think. Now, I'm recording this as the Brooklyn Nets are locked in a battle with the Chicago Bulls. And however that goes, the Nets are still struggling quite a bit. They're 2-5. They have the worst defense in the NBA. Can this team be turned around by Ime Udoka? Or is this going to turn into the sort of Drew Bledsoe going to the Buffalo Bills when Tom Brady was taking over and saying, wow, you're going to send this guy to that team? You're okay with that? Who knows how it's going to go over the course of time? 2-3 years from now, anything can happen. This year, are the Brooklyn Nets going to get turned around by coaching? Okay, you can say, well, Steve Nash was not very good. That's fair. They've been missing players. They don't have Ben Simmons. Seth Curry has been out. TJ Warren has been out. So they're still not full. They're still not whole. But also at the same time, what's going to make Brooklyn a really great team? Is Ime going to get Kyrie to defend at this level? Is Ime going to get Kevin Durant to put in all that effort? Is he going to get Joe Harris and Patty Mills and Seth Curry to defend? I mean, he can go in there and try some funky defenses and he might experiment with some zone. But as far as the Celtics allowing Ime to go make the Nets better, I don't see how much better he taking over on November 1st. I don't see how much better he is going to make them. Now, I'm sure that he might have been reading the tea leaves and saying Kevin Durant was already looking to get Steve Nash out of there. I'm going to watch a lot of Brooklyn Nets. I'm going to watch a lot of Philadelphia 76ers. I'm going to watch a lot of these teams that have been struggling early to see which coach might be on the hot seat so I can swoop in. And so he might be prepared. He might have a lot of notes and he might have a lot of things that he's been putting together just for this potential moment. But I don't see how he's going to get this team to buy in exactly the same way the Celtics did. The Celtics had Marcus Smart, who turned out to be the defensive player of the year. They had Robert Williams, who many argue should have been the defensive player of the year. Either way, two guys who were candidates for defensive player of the year. One guy won it. Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum, pretty good wing defenders, and Al Horford, pretty good defender. So he had a bunch of guys that, they struggled early on, but once they bought in, he had defensive horses out there. None of these guys are going to defend at this level. Ben Simmons might be able to, but Ben Simmons hasn't exactly been known to respond to the hard coaching. I don't know if Ben Simmons is going to respond to that level of coaching. Now, Kyrie and Kevin Durant have had a year with Ime Udoka, but he was an assistant. And it's just a little bit different as an assistant. When they come to you and be like, oh, can you believe what Steve wants me to do? And he can chuckle and be like, yeah, but I think he's trying to do blah, blah, blah. Like you can kind of get away with some of that stuff. You're not in charge, right? So in charge, Ime Udoka is gonna play this pretty hard. Is Kyrie Irving on his current spiral going to respond to anybody? Is he going to respond to anybody? I mean, he didn't respect. Think of all the different layers of players that he didn't respect. The guys that have coached him. If you don't respect Steve Nash, then you're not going to respect Ime as far as his playing. Kyrie's going to be like, yeah, but I mean, you were just a journeyman. If he can't trust Steve Nash, an elite all-time great point guard who understands how it is to be great and the pressures of being great, then I don't know how Kyrie's going to respond to how Ime is coaching him. I don't know how he's going to react to some of the things that are going on out there. He's already a mess. This could make it worse. Now, Kevin Durant, I think Ime and KD are cut from the same cloth. Those two guys are going to roll with one another, and that might be enough but it's going to have to take a lot of KD to get the Nets to a top seed in this East. I mean, you're already 2-5, so maybe they win this game against Chicago, but it's the end of the third quarter and it's only a 3-point game. So if they drop to 2-6, it's just that every step you fall behind makes it harder to catch up in this East. So am I worried that Ime is going to make this team better? Sure, a little bit. But also, I don't think that Brooklyn has the personnel to do what Ime Udoka wants them to do. And I don't think the guys that they have are going to respond right away. And I don't think once they respond, they're capable of putting together what the Celtics did last year. I don't think this is going to go entirely great. Maybe he gets them to a 500 team. I just look at this Brooklyn team and I said, if everything goes right, they'll be great. But if it doesn't go right, they will not be good. And it's not going right. Kyrie is already a major disruption and guys are already hurt. Ben Simmons is already not doing great. Are you going to integrate TJ Warren seamlessly? Are you going to get Seth Curry back? Is he, how are you going to use him defensively? If you can't use him defensively, does he become Peyton Pritchard? And he fell out of the lineup last season. So there's a lot here that I can see the Celtics going, yeah, go to Brooklyn, have fun with all of that. Because it has the potential. Obviously, he's a really good coach. Whatever he did off the court notwithstanding, he is on the court a very good coach. But that place is full of drama. Brooklyn is full of drama. And if it would be a miracle if Ime turns that into something drama-free. I just don't think that he's anybody. I don't think anybody is a good enough coach to turn that completely around because the type of personnel they have mentally and the types of players that they have on the floor. So that's it. That's my Ime Udoka reaction podcast. It's a lot, but that's where I've landed on this. And I think it's just, now it's absolutely time to move on. It's absolutely time to move on because now Ime is gone. He's part of the competition. It'll be interesting to hear what he says now that he's going to be talking to the media a lot. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when they come to Boston because he's going to be back in that building and there's going to be a lot of questions for him. So keep it here for all of that because I will have it all covered on the Locked On Celtics podcast. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts and watch the show on YouTube. Can wave to you on YouTube. Hi, ring the bell, comment, get into that community tab. I'm going to start using that a lot more too. And then share the podcast. Would love it if you did that. Tell your friends, family, everybody they should be listening to and watching the Locked On Celtics podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.